How's it going, everyone? Welcome, Eulier Gonzalez here. Today let's go to now explore the functional programming in JavaScript. This functional life, and by life we mean is that we don't need to dive deep too much into the mathematical definitions of this particular tool that we can use now on the language to actually make the code provable, easy to test, maintain, and debug. Alright, so in today's video we're gonna explore this and of course take some notes from the course taught by Kyle Simpson, right? Where he's the author of You Don't Know JS and now Functional Light JavaScript as well. It's a series of books. The idea here is to now understand the conceptual aspect. So understand is the motivation, the intention and motivations behind the functional programming, which is not just a fancy word, and the selling point of this. What is the value proposition of this? So because of that, we already took some notes here. Okay, so learn to apply functional programming concepts in JavaScript to make our programs more readable, which is the most of the time when we have to work for a particular company, or if we're going to write a particular application, the first moment that we make that, it becomes a legacy application. You will have legacy problems. This is something that I want to bring here from Grady Booch. So Grady Booch from the pragmatic engineering here, because this now give a little bit of context of why we actually right now in today's video and in this trends of software development of using now this functional paradigm, which is nothing new to the industry. It's just that with the rise of user interface that allows to write is now a specific small unit of components or atoms, as they like to call, that allows to form now is molecules and then particles and then, or in the words, atoms, particles, and then molecules, and then organism, and then web page, right? So the idea here is understand this first, right? And we need a little bit of context to know that, because if we intend to try to sell this to somebody, all right, try to do that in the most fast and efficient way possible. So it all boils down to understand the reality of things, of why we are actually doing this stuff that we need to do. And this podcast is a very good illustration of why we do the kind of stuff that we do. Most of the time we can boil down is into the sense of power, the lack of power that we as an individuals, and therefore those who now are in position of power, whether it's they inherit that or now they take over, is not, they have to create all of these particular techniques and strategy as a way to now promote and maintain their power, which is quite interesting because, again, as Grady Booch described through the history of computing, which is another history of computing with Grady Booch, okay. The story of computer, or the history of computing with Grady Booch, all right. Shout out to Grady Booch, man. My respect, bro. Jesus. I think it's this one.
Hello and welcome to today's ACM Learning webinar. This webcast is part of ACM's commitment to lifelong learning.
What the French toast is this? 50K, 6 years ago, the history of software engineering. ACM, Association for Computer Machinery. God damn. Oh, the French toast is it?
Certainly overnight, 3,000 computing professionals and students who are ACM members. I'm Will Trace, Lockheed Martin Fellow Emeritus, former chair of ACM SIGSOC, and a member of the ACM Professional Development Committee. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with ACM or what it has to offer, here's more information. ACM offers educational and professional development resources that bolster skills and enhance career opportunities. Our members can stay competitive in a constantly changing world of computing with a range of ACM Learning Center resources at learning.com.
What the F is this?
As technology changes, the way the data infrastructure is built.
Oh, Andrew and G.
As technology changes, the way the data infrastructure is built changes
Interesting.
as well.
And
How
they
do meta
invite
analytics
high
integrate systems
profile.
and scale their software?
Yeah,
How does AI
holy
change the
hell.
way the infrastructure is built? Join us as we hear from CQ Tong, Senior Director at Meta.
Okay. That's interesting. This is the first time. Okay. Associating for computing machinery. And of course, they're giving you some sort of course, curriculum recommendations, and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Okay. Cybersecurity, information systems, information technology, and software engineering. Associate degree computing curricula. Associate degree computing curricula. Associate cybersecurity curricula guidance. Okay. Okay. It is interesting because most of these companies, Ivy Tech Community College. Oh. Ivy Tech, Lord Fairfax Community College. Fairfax is like a bank, I think it is. Fairfax. Fairfax is a bank. Creo Bank, exactly. Fairfax Creo Bank. It's because Lord Fairfax. No, community college. This is another stuff. Bluegrass Community and Technical College, and submit yours. Ivy Tech Community. Oh, but I think this is some curricula. Oh, this is a curricula. Oh, crap. Oh, I get it. Anyway, no, go back. We don't care about. I want to show you only is what Grady Booch on the Grady Booch and this. Oh my God, Grady Booch has hair, bro. Wow, had a black hair. Interesting. This program may not be reproduced or distributed with the express consent distributed without the express written permission of University Video Communications UVC. Okay. San Jose, California, 1996. Holy moly. Grady Booch back then.
A great deal to cover, so we'll dive right into this. I'm Ivar Jakobsen, and I don't dance as well. I'm Grady Booch, Ivar and Jim, my colleagues. I'll be spending the first hour talking, and then Jim, and then Ivar.
That was.
We are limited for time, I'm afraid. Toward the end of the session, we will save about 15 minutes or so for questions. Throughout the presentation, we will be able to take a few questions for clarification. So if we say something that just totally blows you out of the water, or you don't understand, or offends you, we'll go ahead and address the question then. Unfortunately, we won't be able to take extended questions, however. This has been a fascinating journey the last few years with the UML. If you would ask me, if you will, the piece I'm talking about here are two things, and hopefully you will walk away.
Oh my god, he has black hair.
Their classes together.
And that was 1996, man.
But I must make some decisions about how I partition the delivered system in ways in which they change independently. Like, here's a DLL.
I love that show, man.
Or whatever technology you might use. Those are design decisions I worry about there.
But in any case, what I really want, again, I just wanted to bring out this stuff here that are relevant for the discussion of the functional programming, and that is to understand is why we need this functional approach to do this kind of stuff, based on the Kyle Simpson expertise, which is a software developer that has previously worked with several companies. He's the author of other books like You Don't Know JS and Functional Light JavaScript. With the term light, it is more like a not dive deep into the mathematical models and descriptions and the mathematical the mathematical description, or the mathematical Jesus, what am I saying? What am I gonna say? The mathematical descriptions of how we are, the mathematical description of all of these techniques that now we can use on JavaScript, right? So we are not going to describe is 1 + 1 is 2. So there is, of course, a mathematical definitions and way to prove that, right? But here, most of the time, we just go with our life without knowing that mathematical definitions of 1 + 1 is equals 2, and we just only really care about the applicability of this. So how can we now use these particular actions and tools in our daily lives to actually is now see the bills when you go out to take out a girl, or to buy some beer, or to pay the gym subscription that are quite a nightmare recently. So, in other words, and to understand why we look at the functional programming is also to see that this is not a paradigm that is something new, come out of the thin air. It's just something that has been done for previous computer science. That's the reason why I love to use this sentence that I am on the shoulder of giants, because it is true, despite that it might be used for a lot of marketing purpose. So this functional approach as a way to understand a little bit how do we get here on the history, which is something that now Grady Booch described here in this beautiful podcast from the pragmatic engineering. He mentioned is that how do we need, or at least back then now, functional approach was a thing, or in other words, algorithmic way to decompose systems were a big thing, because now we were able to describe all of these processes through algorithms. So we also look at the functional programming. However, because when you take a look at the reality and then you want to try to describe that, okay, that's why now Grady Booch or the Booch method say, let's take a look at the world at different lens here. So in terms of looking at the world as processes, let's take a look at the world through atoms. And that's why now the classes kick in as a way to now have this abstract data type, which is the way of how you can is also is high information inside of this particular data that is not relevant to the outside world, is only relevant for this. Again, all of this are just models that come up as a way to now find a way to deal with this software challenge and the software architecture. So how can we combine all of these different pieces of computations in a way that allow us to create this now not only monolithic, but also is this distributed computing. Now, because of that, and since for just to make a quick recap of this, it's important to at least understand now that the history of computing, which is something that I want to at least brought that out here for the next 10 minutes, right? Where is it? Where is it? The story of computing. I think it's this one. Oh well. What? Hey, Uncle Bob. Okay. Anyway. Jesus.
I grew up in a small town in the dusty plains of North Texas, the son of a sheriff.
This is interesting with the way how we can speak the English. I really love about that. Honestly, I truly love that.
Was the son of a pastor. Getting into trouble was not an option. And so I started reading calculus books for fun. That me too. That led me to building a laser and a computer and model rockets, and that led me to making rocket fuel in my bedroom. Now, in scientific terms, we call this a very bad idea. Around that same time, Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey came to theaters, and my life was forever changed. I loved everything about that movie, especially the HAL 9000. Now, HAL was a sentient computer designed to guide the Discovery spacecraft from the Earth to Jupiter.
Okay, but again, it's not this. It's not this. The history of computing, because I just wanted to. I think it's this one. Exactly. Why is this? It might sound quite boring to a lot of you. It's like history. What the fuck do I have to do with? And you have to do a lot because, for example, when you were young, you definitely remember a lot of bad stuff that happened to you. A lot of that, a lot of that. You know, is if you can count the stuff that you yeah, if you can count is the number of bad stuff versus the number of good stuff that happened to you in your life, what will you think that you will have more? Right? Most of the time, is the bad thing that we actually can count easily because there is an emotion attached. So, the idea here, at least to in the next 10 minutes, is to dive deep into this in an emotional way so we can now connect to why we are here and why we are actually looking at that from the emotional aspect, but don't let that emotions to actually manipulate for us, because emotions, after all, is something that we can use that as a tool to move us in the way that we need to look at things, in the way to actually are helpful and give us now sense of what we are doing, show us the truth. So because let me see here exactly, because here, by understanding now that the computation or the history of computing is something that is intertwined with power, with those who have access, whether it's they inherit that power or they have taken over that power. So the point is that it has been closely related to what we are perhaps used to listen, despite that you might hear on or internet, on TikTok or Instagram or any other YouTube reel, you name it. Now,
Series that explores the co-evolution of computing and humanity and the ways in which one has influenced the other. So today we're going to look at one specific element of that, one part of the human experience, namely the co-evolution of computing and warfare.
exactly, the co-evolution of computing and warfare. Warfare, software warfare. And it's interesting when they use the term fair, it's pretty much like the software, you know. No, it's not. Warfare. Okay, warfare.
Ends in what we in the West would call the Middle Ages, although in the Islamic world this is the Golden Age. So let's come to a moment in the city of Baghdad, on the east bank of the Tigris River. We find a place called the House of Wisdom. Here was a place of learning, of meeting, a place where cultures could come together with acceptance of one another, and where mathematics and science began to flourish. One man in particular, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khazarmi, was in the center of a lot of this work, and it is from him we have the ideas that come from the Hindus that lead to modern numbers, the Arabic numbers. We have the idea of the algorithm, and thus born the names algebra, the idea of bringing broken things together. That's
Algebra.
and algorithm. Now, algorithms, as Knut has noted, is at the core of what happens in computer science. It is the essence of what we try to do and find good algorithms and make those things manifest in the world. Algorithms can capture the process in something just as sacred as a Japanese tea ceremony, but also make itself manifest in these ways as well. Ray tracing algorithms
Mhm.
was to send a report to the armory saying, here is a great new weapon we can use because it allows us to see the enemy far. And only then later can he turn his eyes to the heavens. So even great minds such as him applying his art and science to the art of war. And so it goes. One of the things that happened in the 14th century that changed the face of war was the creation of gunpowder. War has needs, just like we as humans have needs. One of the needs of war is to provide the right kind of tip of the arrow, if you will, the greatest violence one can have, with the greatest protection for the combatants. And one of the interesting things about the stirring the first and then the gunpowder was that all of a sudden it changed the economics of warfare, such that the king, who could own the gunpowder and could afford it, kind of kept his prince and princesses at bay a little bit because he did the controlling. But now we have more science that was involved here because in the early battles, basically you do point blank putting the cannoneers together with one another and shoot horizontally. But it was discovered in the 1500s, if you elevate it a certain way, you get a bigger distance. If you use different recipe for your gunpowder, you can do some cool things. So notice this gentleman here with a little instrument in which he can take a look at what should he raise that cannon to a particular elevation so that he can get the best distance. Science began to enter the art of conflict. Enter John Napier. A lot of things happened.
Yeah, a lot of things happen here with James Napier.
Was a number of aids to calculation. Napier's bones, the notion of an algorithm, and now all of a sudden the calculations of these kinds of things, both for looking at the heavens as well as for killing our fellow man, could be made more efficient. Science tends to do that. This is not me on a bad hair day, I just want to assure you. My wife has seen me like this, but it is the astronomer Herschel, who was a friend of
Herschel.
the young man on the side, Charles Babbage. One day they were apparently developing some tables. Tables were a big thing back then because they were used for a number of reasons, some dubious reasons. They're casting astronomical tables, some economic reasons, such as what the British Navy needed, the ephemeris tables, so like tell where I was in the world. One day they were apparently calculating some tables, very, very tedious stuff, and Babbage explained, my God, I wish these things could be done by steam. He saw that there was a means of making this mechanized because he saw the hints of the algorithm below the surface. And of course, he had a hint of how he might proceed, and it was through the work of the weaver, Jacquard. Now, weaving was an important thing economically, especially around the city of Lyons, but it was also a terribly labor-intensive kind of thing. So, gentlemen such as him said, what can we do to remove the repetitive nature of this thing and eliminate the human from the common thread we're going to see here, one of the many threads. And so he devised, as you well know, the Jacquard loom. The cool thing about this picture on the bottom right is it actually, the weaving done
Fair
with a
use.
loom of some 25,000 cards. Now, think of him as the original dot-com billionaire because Napoleon thought this was pretty cool and gave him a lifelong pension and gave him a royalty for every loom that was created. So this guy was pretty happy. Not everybody was happy though, especially those followers of the mythical General Ludd. And thus we have born the Luddites, who were the first to break apart the looms because they were too keen about what this mechanization was doing to them. Babbage, as you well know, went on to produce some elements of the difference engine. He got a little distracted with an oak squirrel and went on to produce, well, not maybe not what that.
Oh, squirrel.
That's probably not in history books.
Squirrel. Oh, squirrel. This is not cultural.
Produce this, you can go see a replica of it downstairs, which is just wickedly cool. Now here we are at a time where, in many ways, computing was simply a companion to war. As we went into battle and followed along with us, we used it occasionally. It was certainly used in the calculations to determine latitude and longitude, an important piece of the tables we would find for navigation. But as time progressed and the fruits of the Industrial Revolution and the fruits of science came together, we found ourselves in a very different place. At the beginning of World
As the architect
curious thing happening here because we have a fragile set of
Frank Ferdinand. Frank
This
Ferdinand.
is what caused the collapse of those dominoes, leading us to what then was called the Great War. And of course, following the Great War was the Great Depression, and then the rise of fascism, leading to the Second World War, in which truly we had the full force of science brought to the means of destruction.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the interesting aspects of all of this. And I close my eye because it's very, 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 very deep in our families. Most of the time, our grandparents or grandparents actually can relate to this vastly. They didn't have access to all of this knowledge and data that we have currently now. And by understanding that now with how the First World War, one single event actually now make a ripple effect through the entire geopolitical aspect, and that lead to the First World. And this is how now men have earned their place in these societies through history. Is or whether you go to work or a job, or in other words, to work the land, or you go to the military. And now, luckily for us, we also have is the college. All right. So this stuff called college is something that is quite recent in terms of how now the opportunity has given to the people, the younger generations. That's a way to now is get into this particular systems, this way of how we organize our society and all the problems that we have inherited, and so on and so forth. So this first war that marks the use of course, science into the battlefields, and then that lead to the depression. To now with the rise of fascism movement that say, hey, we can do better thanks to the science apply in the most deadly and succinct manners. We have now seen the horror of that. It is interesting because when you look at the from the another lens, not only as Grady Booch with the computer science approach, but also for the psychology, the way of how do we look and analyze ourselves from Carl Jung. So Carl Jung described is, hey, all of these problems that happen in the outside world is because they are happening inside of us, in all of us. And all of us now share some commonalities, that which is known as the persona, and at least this archetype that we have built in, whether it is for example the warrior, the lover, the king, in some the mother, and some other images that when you look at the tarot, and I know this is go beyond a little bit of the scope, but I just want to I will come back to what we really care, is that those particular archetypes is now a way pseudoscience way to try to actually is describe is all of this recurring stuff that happened in our life, and that happened before, that repeats all of these particular patterns, which is the mathematics is all about. All of these patterns that happen inside of us when we have certain a set of behaviors. But in any case, so by looking at that lens and also going back to the computer science, and now after the Second World War, the use of science has been used in the most effective way to make warfare, for warfare, Now let's keep going and listen to this, and then we go back to what we really care, which is the functional programming in JavaScript.
War has many needs, and one of those needs is to defend your borders and to keep others from coming into the war. This is exactly what Hitler did. He had some brilliant and yet terribly strange strategies, one of which was to deploy a number of U-boats in the Atlantic, and the idea of, with sufficient chaos, he would keep the U.S. out of the war. It was also terrible for the British because it was the means of isolating them. And so penetrating their network was very, very important to the British. They had a need to break through that communication barrier. Now, here again, we find the full force of science applied to this because those messages were encrypted. Now, one of our politicians did a profoundly stupid thing. Well, that's a bit redundant. Politician and profoundly stupid.
Anyway,
Sorry. But it was Secretary of State Simpson who said, real gentlemen do not read other people's mail. Well, how stupid. Because that mail contained some incredibly profound bit of information. The British, on the other hand, had no difficulty with that. And what they were going after was trying to break the Enigma code. The Enigma code was a particularly challenging one. The Germans had basically taken over this idea of some folks from Poland, produced the device you see here.
this idea from they took from Polish, because is also interesting. The Poles has developed, and they have a lot of time and the environment to now think about this mathematical, or in these patterns, this recurrent stuff that happens in the realms of the mathematics, and things that we can learn, what one gets to know.
Cloud and used it to good purpose. There was an even harder code, the Lorenz code, which was used by the High Command, and the purple code as well used by the Japanese. But now our story goes to a place in Bletchley Park, or then to the east of London, where the British brought together a code school and brought the best and brightest to apply their science and mathematics to try to break that code. One of those people, of course, was the here we have Bletchley Park as it was in those days. One of those people was the enigmatic, the mathematician, Alan Turing. Now, incredible guy. Go read some of his biographies with amazing stories about him. He talked about focused fellow. One of the stories goes to the effect that he apparently had a bicycle because parts were kind of short back then. He would slip its chain every 17 revolutions, so people would hear him going, pedaling down the road, and he would count to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He had 17, and he do this little shuffle with his bike. Weird kind of stuff. He basically took some of the ideas of Bayes, the theologian, and applied Bayesian techniques that led him to find some very, very clever ways to break these codes. Now, he did some other things as well. He was well known to von Neumann. He had these forays into what he thought was computable, and I love this one. He happened to be at AT&T and said he thought the brain was computable. He thought there were algorithms in the brain. And so he reported in this cafeteria that he's not looking for a big brain, just
Weekly cool. And then ponía embrujadamente. Weekly cool. I love that.
Here, Eisenhower
Embrujadamente
decoded a message, decoded from the
genial.
Lorenz code in this case, in
Weekly
which it
cool.
said a message from Hitler.
Embrujadamente genial.
Dear Rommel, it doesn't say Dear Rommel. Hey Rommel, if there's going to be an attack in Normandy, just ignore it because I think it's a head fake. And don't move your troops for 5 days. Eisenhower got that the day before D-Day. And so we hear in the press and the movies about the wrangling over the weather. Reality is at that point in time, Eisenhower knew that their head fake of the Normandy operation was fulfilled. Hitler had no idea what was going on. And so he said, we go to who then produced the
What?
Colossus. And the Colossus
Yeah, wait a single moment here.
produced the bomb, which was a set of ways that could determine the wheel settings on an Enigma. And it took a long time for the bomb to do what it needed to do, these horribly noisy kinds of things. But then there was a breakthrough because of a very, very human mistake. Humans, we now have humans as computers, often women in this case, would go through the cribs, the hints they would find. But one very important hint came about because of a lackadaisical Enigma operator who was sending a message from Vienna down to Athens in which he repeated the same message twice without changing the wheels on the Enigma code. And from that, they found a new way to attack the code. So taking Turing's brilliant idea, we have the addition of a brilliant engineer in the name of Tommy Flowers, who then produced the Colossus. And the Colossus was an amazing device. If you have a chance to go to Bletchley, go see it. It is just wickedly cool. Late Tony Sale produced a version of it. Bring us now to a few days before D-Day. The first Colossus is up.
Fair use.
And here Eisenhower has just been delivered a message, decoded from the Lorenz code in this case, in which it said, a message from Hitler to Rommel saying, Dear Rommel, it doesn't say Dear Rommel, hey Rommel, if there's going to be
Rommel.
an attack in Normandy, just ignore it because I think it's a head fake. And don't move your troops for 5 days. Eisenhower got that the day before D-Day. And so we hear in the press and the movies about the wrangling over the weather. Reality is at that point in time, Eisenhower knew that their head fake of the Normandy operation was fulfilled. Hitler had no idea what was going on. And so he said, we go to work. The decoding of the Lorenz code, because of the work of Colossus, because of the work of Turing, led us to D-Day. And that's an amazingly powerful event in time. Now this led us to some ethical issues. Because we knew, because we were reading their mail, we knew before the Germans knew what was going to go on. So there are many circumstances documented where we knew there was going to be attack by U-boats, and yet if we declared to our convoy to go change course, the Germans would get some hint that we had broken their codes. And so the decision was sometimes made, we would let those convoys go, knowing full well that we would be attacked, and knowing full well people would be killed. The ethics of computing are in full force upon us, and they often have tragic consequences. After the war, Turing fell into obscurity because at the end of the war, Churchill made the declaration that every bit of this project will be broken up into a piece no larger than a man's fist. He called the people at Bletchley the geese that did not cackle because there was no disclosure from anyone until the 70s when this was made public that this even existed. So Turing went off into obscurity. He tried to find a new job. He was just another out-of-work mathematician, and so he was not viewed as special by anyone else. As you may know the story, he was robbed one time. In his statement to the police, he disclosed that he had a partner, a male lover, and the sodomy laws were such that he was actually prosecuted, chemically castrated, and then committed suicide. The man whose work had saved the war by 2 years was in turn killed by the machinery of the state that he saved. Tragedies. I would not be here were it not for Turing.
Me neither,
So
man.
the war had indeed come to
Me neither. I wouldn't be here for you, man. I wouldn't be here for you, man. because the work that he have made, and then how this becomes now a business.
Gone on for 2 more years. My mother would have never met my dad. My mother was born in Esslingen, in Germany. My father was part of the Allied forces, became the provost marshal of Hamburg, and the two met there. If it were not for Turing, I would not be here for you today. So, thank you, Alan. Yeah, pretty amazing. Wow. Boy, the stories I could tell you.
Boy, is the story that I can tell you. But I'm not.
Now that we have it in the UK, let's take a look at where we have a different set of needs. So we were not so much under siege, and we could take the full force of our industrial might and apply it. Thus was born, led by Grady Booch, the National Defense Research Council, the Research Board, which was, among other things, the focus behind the Manhattan Project, but also launched so many other things. Let us go now to the Aberdeen Proving Grounds, where we had a particular problem we were dealing with, and it goes back to the old age issue of gunpowder and artillery. It seems that, especially in North Africa, we have these really long distance artillery called the long toms, and we produce these amazing firing tables for them. In these cases, we were shooting something that could go at least 60 miles, so little bits of thing off made a big difference. And firing tables here
Fair use.
could contain variables as many as 500 different aspects. Things like the wind speed, the humidity, the temperature of the gunpowder, for God's sake. And so the joke was often that the paperwork that followed the gun was often as heavy as the guns itself. And the tables that we sent to North Africa were wildly inaccurate. So what can we do to increase our science to make these things more accurate? Thus, Grady Booch and others brought to full force the notion of a differential analyzer, which we can apply with our human computers again to help us build these tables, to build the firing clubs for these guns, using them in the Aberdeen Proving Grounds. You hear the stories of
Ballistic
the
class.
inhibitor. We also have the top secret rosings, a number of women who worked in obscurity, much like back in Turing's days, Turing's time, to do this very, very tedious mechanical calculation. Now, here again we apply our full force of our engineering talent. But what you're seeing is this very bright thread that leads us from the needs of war, pushing back as an engineering solution that leads us to increasing levels of automation, bring us to modern computing. We have Aiken, who really pissed off IBM because he worked with IBM to develop the Mark I, basically took all the credit for it. Watson was not a happy man, and so I must say, thank you IBM for letting me do this, to say that for our lawyers, so thank you. I'm going to make Aiken's mistake. Along the way, by the way, one of the
Not gonna make
lawyers, so thank you. I'm going to make Aiken's mistake. Along the way, by the way, one of the programmers in, so thank you. I'm going to make Aiken's mistake. To say that for happy man, and so I must say, thank you IBM for letting me do this, to say that for our lawyers, so thank you.
For a lawyer. Oh my god. Oh crap, nigga. Oh,
Make Aiken's mistake.
aching mistake. Oh, aching mistakes. Oh man, this is this is wild. Aiking's mistake. IBM. Conceptual designer behind the IBM's Harvard Mark I. First programmable computer. God damn! Lockheed Martin and Los Santos. Oh shit. Hmm.
We have Aiken, who's really pissed off IBM because he worked with IBM to develop the Mark I. Basically took all the credit for it. Watson.
Hmm. 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 Mm. 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 Mm.
Was not happy man, and so I must say, thank you IBM for letting me do something to save for a lawyer, so thank you. Not going to make Aiken's mistake.
Not gonna making a mistake. Exactly, because they're gonna defend it, and also is part of the existential threats that you're doing there.
Along the way, by the way, one of the programmers that was with this project is the indomitable Grace Murray Hopper. She was there to, as well.
Grace Murray Hopper. Grace Murray Hopper. Interesting. Hmm. Hmm. In accounting and business. John Patterson, man. Hmm. Hmm. Mhm. God damn it, bro. Was a magnetic data store device invented by Gustav Tosh in 1932. Magnetic drum. Magnetic core memory. Hmm. Hmm. Interesting.
One of the programmers basically looking out for the Navy's needs in space. This is a Navy project. By the way, extra points for those of you who come up to me afterward and explain to me what the meaning of that book is. Talk about yourself. No, we removal of entities. The next phase of evolution was done by Eckert and Mauchly. About 9 months after Pearl Harbor, Mauchly wrote this paper saying, "But wait a minute, we can take the notions of vacuum tubes This,
Mm.
this curiously, I found in an Army report, so it gives you the sense for how much the military was part of the fertilization of what was going on. But there was something more we could do. Von Neumann recognized that we could apply this in the full force, the art and science for conflict, but there were other things we could do with it as well. Now, World War II vastly reshaped the landscape of things. Now, bear with me a moment, because we're doing a bit of a change in what computing is doing.
Exactly.
Computing
A
had
change of stories.
ages, a companion tool, and now fully it was an
It was
instrument.
instrumental
We
war.
had applied it to full effect to counter some of the needs of warfare for reading other people's mail, for defense. And after the war, things changed because now we can use it to feed the insatiable diet of other needs of the war. The war reshaped the world, obviously. And many parts of the world, however, were in ruins. Were it not so, the story of computing would be very different, because there was a very, very, very brilliant man, Konrad Zuse, in Germany, who had developed the Z1, the Z2, Z3, and he was doing so to deal with a very different problem, the problem of flutter in aircraft wings, and used the Z3 for that very purpose. He had some brilliant ideas, indeed, in some ways ahead of what we were doing here, and yet it never reached the flowering because of the destruction that came around him. He also, very importantly, never had the ecosystem, the infrastructure that would feed him in this body of knowledge. So you saw this back in Muhammad ibn Musa's time, where you had this flowering of events. He did not have it, but it was beginning to develop in the United States, and that made all the difference. The U.S. won, and so here we were in a place as the only major intact power, and that gave us amazing possibilities. And so you see that the flowering of computers in past tense. So if you move forward in time and bring out the number of computers in the world produced by us, and the computers in the world produced elsewhere, what I find striking about this is that we can count them. If you, my gosh, we knew how many there were. Today would be, I gotta use this, billions upon billions of computers. Thank you, Kurt. What did we fear? We feared the Soviets. Just as Churchill was fearing the Soviets, that fear began to expand. Remember bomb shelters? I certainly do. We had several on our block. It was a cool thing to happen. But it wasn't just the idea of building bomb shelters. It was very much in the oxygen that we breathe.
Man, bro. Oh my God.
If the bomb flashes, then go off and do this. And so
Oh my God. It was for real, man.
all right. I feel safe. I feel empowered by my
I feel empowerment. You know, that's the one of the things that when you trust a lot of with the institution, and with that, it doesn't mean that I need to go against to that. It's just to understand that the purpose and the goal of all of this institution is exclusively for themselves, and most of the time it's not aligned with yours. That's all. That's all.
restructuring that happened between science
So
and
80% is the most collaboration that you can get from there.
So one of the things that happened after the war was the creation of the RAND Corporation.
Hmm.
The General of the Air Force happened to have about $10 million lying around. That was a lot of money back then. And he had these visions for long-term strategic bombing, and therefore started the RAND Corporation. We'll see them pop up again in our story, but among other things, they were dealing with one of the other needs of war, namely, how do I get people from place to place at the right time in the right place? Operations research. And from this was born the simplex method, another algorithm applying to, in this case, the needs of war,
Hmm.
What need was this meeting? The Navy in this case had a need to build simulators because we had all these different kind of aircraft. And so they took some of the mechanical simulators and said, we can automate this thing. And thus was born the Goldberg project, which had amazing transformative powers in terms of the technology and the form we have in our computing systems. Sputnik startled us. And I remember when this happened and when the reports came out, it was like, crap, we didn't see that one. And so when the Soviets launched Sputnik,
Grab, we didn't see that coming.
and one of the things that Eisenhower did was to create art because we did not want to be surprised. And one of the people behind our specifically the information processing techniques office was Licklider. And he, as you may know, went on to lead Project MAC. Project MAC led us to the first time-sharing system. So we can see this amazing flowering of computing.
Time-sharing system.
Fear is a great motivator. And we talk about the civil defense stuff. What were we worried about then? We were worried then about the threat, this time, of the threat of
Fair use.
bombers. And so thus was formed these three lines. And the far end of it was the distant early warning line. Taking the ideas from Whirlwind, it was realized we could apply that to feed information from our radar and build a command and control system that led us to the automation of the the semi-automatic automation. If you have a chance here, if you haven't been to a museum before, go down and see one of these and take a look at the ashtray in one of these things, a real sign of the time.
Ashtray.
My iPhone does not have an ashtray in our picture. MITRE was formed for this. So here we see RAM, ARPA, and the MIT group, and now MITRE Corporation. These groups of the industrial
University business. Mm-hmm. University and business and defense.
Bell Labs comes over the scene. And if you think back to the invention of the transistor, it also had its roots in war. Part of what was going on with the SAGE system was the need for these longer distance radar, and that meant higher frequency radar, which meant higher powered radar, which meant the vacuum tubes were good enough for us. And so there was tremendous research in a number of places that led us to an understanding of how we could do switching at the level of semiconductor devices. And of course, Schottky and his crew developed the junction transistor. Primarily, Bell Labs has a need to deal with these radars. I'll say it politely, Schottky was not a nice man. He was, I'll just leave it at that, he's not a nice man. And so the traitorous aides left him, formed Fairchild, but Fairchild is a military story as well. One of the first things, I'll just leave it at that. He's not a nice man. And so the traitorous aides left him, formed Fairchild, but Fairchild is a military story as well. Left him. I'll just leave it at that. It was not enough. These radars. I'll say it politely. Shockley was not enough.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Nice man.
Fairy child.
I'll just leave it at that. He's not a nice man. And so the traitorous aides left him, formed Fairchild, but Fairchild
Fairy child. It was. Holy fuck. Sherman Fairchild. Fairchild, New York City, 1932. Jesus. Fucking Christ. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Shockley. Anyway. Oh, all right, okay. Yes, no surprise. Mm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Holy shit! Gordon Moore. Interesting. Gordon Moore? Are we talking about the same Moore? Oh, fuck. Oh my. Oh my god. Holy French toast, bro. Mm-hmm. Shit. Mm-hmm. Knowledge, bro. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Holy moly. Holy. Mm-hmm. Mm. All right. Okay. Okay. Jesus, that was. Hmm.
One of the first people,
Fairchild.
if you've done a startup, here they were in a startup mode. Where's the money coming from? Well, in this case, IBM had been tasked to do the guidance system for the XB-70, a new range of bombers. There was a transformation going on in the bomber community and the reconnaissance community, moving from photographic reconnaissance to digital reconnaissance, and in the move from bombers that were these long lumbering things to these supersonic kinds of things. There was a need for a lot of circuitry in them. In this case, IBM said, we need some transistors that are hardened in a particular way. We need to go buy them. They went to Fairchild, and that was their first major contract, apparently, and that kind of got them going from there on. The rest, they say, is history, because so much in Silicon Valley came because of the flourishing of Fairchild. Another element that played a role here was the move toward integrated circuits. Weight became an issue. As we moved into the Minuteman era, we wanted to have better navigation systems. We weren't going to put an ENIAC inside one of these things, but you're going to put more and more components that need the guidance system for a Minuteman. I think we have at the museum some bits and pieces of it here. Contains some 15,000 straight components, about 2,000 integrated circuits. And Noyce and crew, having invented the integrated circuit, who were they selling it to? Until about 1963, virtually all of the world's productions of integrated circuits went either to the Apollo program or the Minuteman program. Follow the money, and it's what drove us along in many cases. Another thing that was happening around this time is it was no longer just the hardware, but it was the software. And it was through the NATO conference that we had the first understanding of what software engineering was. And software was becoming a dominant factor. A dear friend of mine, Barry Bain, tells the story that he was working on a satellite project. And one day a gentleman came in, he was the weights guy, because weight management is very important on these devices. Here we are deep in the Minuteman era, and all of a sudden the threat from the Soviets begins to increase, because now we're in the age of mutually assured destruction. So what you gonna do?
Mutually assured destruction.
Instead of having these static places, we launch our missiles, we put them on rail cars, and now we can move them about the world. But that creates a problem. When you launch one of these things, you've got to know very precisely where it is. This, by the way, is the same problem that Harrison faced back in the 1800s when he was dealing with navigation with a longitude problem. You need a very accurate timepiece. He did it with mechanical clock. We did it because of work from one of our national laboratories, the atomic clock. The atomic clock came from the This is very telling for me because it says that we may have this great focus on computing, and yet in the process we may lose track of the fact that warfare is an incredibly intimate thing that impacts us in so many ways. And now we are here again, East Bank of the Tigris River in Baghdad, the first information war. The confluence of computing has brought us such that we have moved from computing as a companion to war, and now an instrument
of war.
becomes a place to war. Because we use the full force of all of our work on us. This is the war. This is the war that we brought real time to our homes. Thanks to the communication networks that were out there, we could visit more. And I love this observation that in the Gulf War, an ounce of silicon was more powerful than a ton of spectrum. It made strategic difference. We did it because we applied the full force of our computing technology to dominate space. We employed every satellite we had. We dominated air with the AWACS that you see there. We dominated the land communication and the first use of smart weapons. Again, moving from gunpowder to these incredibly precise kinds of weapons. A lot of this was responsible thanks to the Dartmouth Strategic Computing Initiative. We talk again about the confluence of people and ideas. The Strategic Computing Initiative was an important meeting of minds, and it brought us the ideas behind very large-scale integration and the risk processing. It brought us the notion of target recognition, which led us to the smart weapons we spoke of. It led us to the beginning of these unmanned vehicles, and it led us to some advances in supercomputing. The connection machine came out of these ideas. It led to some incredible ideas in artificial intelligence or cyber intelligence to this place. 50 nations are invested in Predator aircraft these days. Indeed, I would claim, talking to my Air Force buddies, we have probably created the last manned fighter because the next generation of fighters will not require humans to them. This creates some very interesting challenges. How do we wake up in the morning, kiss your kids goodbye, go off and kill someone, and come back? How does that affect us?
This is how we as men have done over millennia, bro. That's what happened. And now you haven't dealt with that. This is another stuff there. But we, as men and women, know that that's how the things are. Can we change it? Perhaps. But that's how we have inherited all of this challenge, bro.
And furthermore, what does this mean from just the rules of law perspective? There are some very legitimate questions on the table about the use of targeted killing, because that's effectively what it's doing. Is assassination part of the laws of war? We don't know. It's something that we must consider. Another way that war helps us, or one of the needs of war, is that we all want to have people in harm's way. So the creation of these autonomous vehicles, why do you think we're putting so much money there? We want to put these vehicles into play to keep us at arm's distance from the enemy themselves. And thus, DARPA has been spending a lot of energy here. Google, by the way, hired a number of the folks from some of the teams that worked on these projects. Not only have we gotten to smart bombs, we're now in the age of smart bullets. And so at the Sandia Laboratory, we're in a place now we can send a small bullet-like projectile directly to a specific target. Imagine now truly targeted killing to an individual on the street. We have the means. There are some things we know we can do. The question for us is, should we do them? This one freaks me out. It stands about this high. It's a thing called Big Dog. And rather than schlepping all of my gear into combat, let's get one of these things. Back in World War I, we used horses. Imagine now using these automated devices. But not just a single device. A lot of the energy going on in swarm robotics is happening here. What happens if you take a swarm of nanobots, this digital dust, if you will, and put the downside of this is Helena was a bit of a captive of her own island,
Mm-hmm.
There's this delightful Twitter conversation that's going on. On the left-hand side, if you come up again, so I'll give you the Twitter feed, there's a group from Al Qaeda that's throwing taunts at us via Twitter about the terrible things going on. And so shortly thereafter, we in the Allied forces set up another Twitter feed that are fighting against them. So you have this taunting going back and forth. It reminded me of a scene from Monty Python and The Search for the Holy Grail, in which the French guy is up there taunting the other British, saying, your father smells of elderberries and I fart in your general direction. This is cool. I get to say fart on PBS. This is cool. You may want to edit that one better. But that's the kind of
Fart.
that's the kind of taunting that's going on. But it's more than just taunting, because Al Qaeda is using this for recruiting, for all sorts of things in communication, to bring the full force of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we fear? We have created the U.S. Cyber Command because we fear cyber attacks. The network is continuously under attack, and now very much computing has become the place where warfare happens. Russia was not happy with what Georgia was doing, so they launched a denial of service attack upon all of the Georgian infrastructure. This is a picture taken from defacing some of the web pages on the Georgian sites in which they were equating their president with Hitler. So it was a nasty, nasty war, but it was a war that was happening underground. The Stuxnet word is, in a way, part of the cyber. It was the first targeted virus that we applied. Well, when I say we, I don't know who the we is. That's left up for debate yet. Was it us? Was it Israelis? Hard to say right now. Targeted at the infrastructure within the Iranian nuclear power plants that targeted a very specific kind of processor used in the industrial techniques. Here's the question for me then. Remember back to Birdman? Killed by one bullet. We had this interlocking set of treaties. Today we have a set of treaties. Is an act of cyber warfare an act of war that could cause the collapse of these treaties as well? Frightening possibility. Einstein observed that this is the height of the Cold War. He didn't know how World War was.
Mm-hmm.
From my point of view of the world, I know how World War III is going to be fought. It's going to be fought with poison terrorists. It already has in some ways. And to be clear, I am not here to celebrate. War is a terrible thing. And in many ways, however, I recognize that war is a part of the human experience. But at the same time, computing has changed the face of warfare. And the quality that has been forged in the fire of war, and use it so that we may move from conflict and move from there to connection. That we may move from destruction to delight, and move also from persecution to liberation. The story of computing is the story of humanity, and it's a rich, rich story. Thank you for having me on this journey.
All right. Well, that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.